You don't have to be an art historian to enjoy sacred art and to share it with your kids. Today's guest, Kerri Davison, is here to tell us about enjoying sacred art with young children.
Welcome to Homeschooling Saints, the podcast that helps you create the homeschool you love for the people you love. Our host is Lisa Mladinich, a Catholic life coach, TV host, best-selling author, and an instructor at Homeschool Connections.
Before we get started, remember to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the bell to join our channel. Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Mladinich, your host, and today we're talking with Kerri Davison about enjoying sacred art with young children. So much fun. Kerri Davison has been married for 34 years to Ken, and they've been homeschooling for 25 years. They have 8 children, ages 15 to 29, and 4 grandchildren. Together with their family, they founded Holy Heroes 16 years ago. The Davisons publish and produce Catholic book and saint audio stories, most notably Glory Stories. And they have 2 fantastic new books out you're going to love on this topic. The first one is called I Believe, The Apostles' Creed in Sacred Art for Young Children. And the second one is Praying to Holy Angels, Angel of God and St. Michael the Archangel's Prayers in Sacred Art for Young Children. So those will be in our show notes. You can find Kerri and her family and all the beautiful work they do. They're great programs at holyheroes.com. And you can even reach out to Kerri at holyheroes.com. Welcome to the program, Kerri. It's so nice to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited. This is such a great topic. I think it's one of many topics that can scare us when we first start homeschooling until we see other families doing it. What started your interest as a homeschooling mom in using sacred art?
I tried, when my kids were little, I wanted them to have this experience. And, it was just something natural for me. I thought, they should appreciate good things and everything good and true and beautiful. We should be really interested in teaching them and showing them these beautiful things. And I soon realized it's a very hard thing to do. And when my kids were little, I, bought like all the child-sized masterpieces and bought all this stuff. And after I did that, I realized that's great, and now they know all about, now they can look at French impressionists and do all these things. And they think that's, beautiful and certain other things. And it was just kind of hollow for me. And I just, so over the years, I started collecting, postcards at museums. And then you take your kids to museums and, some of it's great. Some of it's terrible. And very little of it is religious. And I just, over time, I realized, this is not it. And I mean, it's good in a way, but it's not what I wanted. And it actually goes back to, I lived in France for a few years when I was younger. And I was always struck by how, this was a long time ago, of course, when I was in my early 20s. So a long time ago, I was struck by how it was so important to, there's no children's, there at the time, and I believe there's probably not now, there's no children's menu in France. The children eat what the parents eat. The children dress as the parents dress. They behave, everything is very, and I did not I did not know any religious people at the time there. I wasn't a practicing Catholic at the time. And so all of that, even though I, saw all the great art and everything, this was not a religious thing. I was just struck by the formation of children there, how from a very young age, and as I'm being served calves brains, in a family, I'm thinking to myself, I want the children's menu, and no children's menu. The kids are just eating this stuff, and I thought, wow, like what? How do you do that? Because I grew up a regular American kid, and it was very intentional on their part. Like, no, they must learn to eat this. They must learn to dress this way. They must learn to speak this way. This is all. And I thought the manners, everything was very specific. And I thought, wow, it made such an impression on me. And I thought, wow. And then later, of course, now when I'm raising my own children as a Catholic, I started realizing that is really, you need to intentionally inculcate what you want your children to appreciate at a young age. It must be done intentionally. And now we live in a world where, everything's upside down. So really hideous things are called beautiful, and really, and things that are naturally beautiful are considered vile. So it's really even more urgent and important now than ever. And we're Catholics. We have a mountain of Catholic beauty available to us, but it's actually a hard thing to do. And so over the years, I remember I used to buy, I have a lot of art books in my house, and I would buy them at library sales and at thrift stores. And because they're, the huge coffee table type books, and buy all these things. And some of them are great, and some of them you're like, not so much. I actually can't even have this in my house, And then I remember I have a book of Russian art, and Russian history is so appallingly goes from bad to worse, type of thing. And then it's reflected in the art. All right. So I remember I was opening this book, it's a beautiful book, and I started looking at it. There's like, some guy with his throat slit and an axe in his head. and my kids are like, wow, what's up with that? Yeah, I will put that away. Okay. And so yeah. I'm just pointing out, that it's, even among great art, there's stuff that's not appropriate for children, or you don't want necessarily your children contemplating on. So the beauty of sacred art is that these are things that your children can, meditate on, can look at, can spend time with, and that can change their hearts and their souls. And those, and so the reason we made these books, I made it, I believe, so it's the creed. So every phrase of the creed has a piece of sacred art associated with that. And there's like a little focus picture there. And on the bottom here, there's a little,
yeah, feel free to hold that up, because our YouTube listeners will enjoy seeing what you've got.
So, like a part of the creed, he descended to hell, and here's a picture of sacred art. And then and there's a little circle there. And then at the bottom, it explains what that is, what that means in a very short little phrase, because it's funny. I was talking to someone, a friend, and I was like, and it explains so every part of the creed, it'll tell you what that specifically means. And this person said to me, you mean like the communion of saints? What's that all about? And I said, yeah, it actually explains the communion of saints. So, so for your children, or for anyone who's looking at it, or a grandparent, or anyone, it will explain specifically what that phrase means in a very short.
I like this for RCIA, frankly.
Well, actually, yes, people like it for that too. But the nice thing about it is a little child can look, and you can read this to them. They can memorize their prayer and associate a piece of beautiful artwork with that phrase. Love have an understanding of what that phrase means. And they can sit and look at every picture in these books and say, and every picture is magnificent. And that will be associated in their mind with a Catholic prayer. And the same with the angel book. And that's actually angel books. Angels are very much, and I don't know that, there are specific families that are very good at this, but obviously in the general culture, angels are completely misinterpreted. But among Catholics, they're actually underutilized. I don't mean to be such a pragmatist about it, but that is the truth.
That's a good point.
Angel, and from a young age, we should be teaching our children, especially now, they're there to help you. They're there to protect you. And I tell my college kids, and every time you take a test, you pray to them, because they can enlighten your mind. When you're taking the test, they will remind you of what it is that you've forgotten. That's their job. And my kids assure me it works. And so so the same thing with the angel prayer, and the praying to angels has a little bit of an introduction about angels, because people need a little bit of more understanding of that, I think. And then it's the same thing. It goes through the prayers. It gives a piece of beautiful art. It explains what that phrase means. And so, it's just like a piece of art,
beautiful,
a little thing. And then it explains what that phrase actually means in art. And I think these are important, especially because they're the truths of the church. And, this is the truth. You're going to spend eternity either in heaven or hell. So we need to tell them that at the early stage,
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty critical information.
You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. So just beginning when they're very young, I love that you have these books because we can it sounds like at any age step into, and this also speaks to learning styles and so many other things, and even a social experience. When they're young, you're going to have them on your lap looking at these together or cuddled together on the couch, right? But you're looking, you're listening, you're touching the nice pages of the book and all of that. So I feel like it's so good to have the words associated with images too. I read somewhere that retention goes way up when words are associated with images too. So it's just a really smart thing to put together as well as very beautiful.
Right. And beauty is, I think that we as homeschoolers get really wrapped up in the academics of everything. Okay. And this is my little secret that I tell people, just to give them a little relief. You really don't have to worry about academics for your 5, 6, and 7-year-old. Honestly, that's my feeling on that. You can actually take this opportunity when they're little to really have them formed in your family and their faith and their hearts, and give them an opportunity to contemplate a picture and have a real understanding of what that picture means. And it's beautiful, and teach them from a very young age. This is what beauty looks like. This is what and you can make it more academic as they get older. The great artists of all times, the greatest, spent all of their time painting for God. We forget that now. And we think, oh, all these, thousands, tens of thousands of pictures just kind of showed up. These were the greatest human artists of all times. And this is what they spent their time doing. So there's you can push this into academics as they get older as well. But I think as a small child, it's more important for them to contemplate this in their hearts. And, with small children, you always go from the concrete to the more abstract. As a child gets older, they understand more abstract things. So I have always kind of, whenever I see this abstract art is everywhere. It's, you walk, every town has got some piece of abstract art, smack in the middle of their, whatever their social area is. And to me, it's a little sad that's where we start all the time. So I think with small children, you start with, concrete beauty. And this is beautiful. This is the Blessed Mother. This is the Lord. And that's what they need to learn as young children and see.
Lovely, lovely. What have some of the responses been of your children? What have they expressed in that process of learning to kind of contemplate and get a handle on beauty and the faith and that integration? What have you noticed that comes out of their mouths or that changes their way of thinking?
I wasn't as, now, of course, since we made these books, I was, I'm being more systematic about this for my grandchildren. Okay. But I do know that my children have a proper understanding of beauty and a proper understanding of what constitutes beauty in art, in the world, in music, all these type of things. And it doesn't mean that they also don't appreciate things that aren't necessarily traditional art or something. But I know for sure that they understand the difference. And I think that's very important, particularly in sacred art. They have a very, I don't know if you've ever seen this. I saw it in the 70s. There was a point where Stations of the Cross were actually on the walls of churches as stick figures. Like they'd have stick figures, and they had like one stick figure down on the ground that was like Jesus fell type of thing. Ooh. And it was terrible. And I just think about it like it's actually, now, if it weren't so sad, it would be laughable. Okay. But that actually passed for art for many, many parishes for a long time. And I think about I was one of them, any child looking at this, what is that all about? What are the stick figure lines? What does all that mean? And you think about how really poor that is in representation of what those events actually, what those pictures, the events they were actually supposed to portray. It's tragic.
Mm-hmm. There's no beauty, but there's also no humanity.
And there's no understanding for a small child. There's no understanding whatsoever. And even a grown adult is looking at that and saying, okay, that is the least inspiring thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. And I think about the years of the church where many people in churches were illiterate, and the church did not respond by dumbing the faith down. They created complex, beautiful, sophisticated works of art so that people were absorbing the stories and the truths of the faith at a transcendent level because things were so beautiful and inspired.
Yes. And that's what you can do with small children who are illiterate. Okay. I mean, that is the truth. And you can show a child a very magnificent, a magnificent piece of art, and you would be shocked at what they actually see in that. And, they'll look at that and they'll say, oh, he looks so sad. And, what is, and it's very interesting how they completely understand what is happening in this picture and the emotions and the feelings of the people. And you have to explain it some details, of course, but it's so interesting how children really take that right into their heart.
That's just beautiful. We have to stop for a really quick break to hear from our sponsors, but we will be right back. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Walter Crawford.
And I'm Maureen Whitman.
We are the co-founders of homeschoolconnections.com and proud sponsors of the Homeschooling Saints podcast,
which is here to help you homeschool more joyfully, more easily, and more effectively.
We want to thank you for listening.
And we invite you to check out our courses at homeschoolconnections.com.
And now, back to our program.
All right, we're back again with Kerri Davison, and we're having a delightful conversation about using sacred art with our young children and what that's like. I'm just wondering, Kerri, when you sit now with your grandchildren and you've got more of a system and you've got a lot of experience, what kinds of questions do you ask them as they're looking at art? How do you teach them what it is to contemplate something beautiful?
With little children, actually, less is better. They don't need to hear a lot of talking. Let them do the talking, show them the picture. You can say the phrase in the prayer, what this means, and they'll just look at it, and they'll have their own little complex imagination going on that little thing. And it's just very interesting how, and you don't really want to explain away too much for kids. Let them absorb that, and let them imprint that picture in their mind associated with that phrase. Because really, this is the time when they're little. They need to memorize all their prayers. So let those prayers be associated with beauty.
Yeah, that's wonderfully said. So we've talked a little bit about, these wonderful books that associate words and pictures. What are some other ways that families can just dip their toes in the water and start to use sacred art?
Well, you can go and libraries unload these books all the time. So library sales and thrift stores. Interesting enough, I find it interesting. I've seen this even among homeschool moms. Tons of people are getting rid of their books now because, everything's online, and they really think that the online experience can replicate a book, which I do not believe it can. And I believe there's all kinds of research now showing that holding a book and turning the pages of a book is a completely different experience, intellectually as well as emotionally, for a child in particular. And I don't think you want to do that. I think you want to have books in your home. Years ago, all these studies were, depending on how many books were in your home and how much your kids read, was a complete, there was a complete correlation between that, or actually a direct correlation between that and academic success. So there was a time when people were like, oh, we have to get more books, we have to read more, we have to do all these things. And I think now, for some reason, people have forgotten that. And So I see this all the time. So if you're looking for books, old art books, but as I said, you have to be careful about what you have and what you're buying. Because, you go to a library sale, it's easy to pick up, 10 art books for nothing. Well, next thing. And then you get home and you realize, I don't want this in my house. Depending on what it is. So you have to be a little discerning.
Yeah, I actually picked up some beautiful art books when our seminary library was buying new books and replacing stuff, and they only had so much space. I couldn't believe the quality of these beautiful, richly photographed artworks that we now have in our home. And it's amazing because those were given away.
And those were probably religious art, which is very hard to find.
Not all. We've got Vermeer and some things like that, but so beautiful and contemplative in the use of light, etc. I like to just sit and look at them from time to time. It's very calming. And that's the thing too, you were just referring to the whole brain science connection, that in the early days of online learning, scientists were noticing that the brain was much more stimulated when students were looking at a computer screen. But then that was the first blush of the data without the proper analysis. What was happening is that their brains were becoming overstimulated, overloaded, and kind of bombarded with stimulation. And there was less retention, less understanding. But when they noticed the calmer state electrically of the brain, if that's the correct way to say it, it was actually a place of deeper learning and understanding. It was much more a learning brain at that quieter state.
Yes. And that's why they're saying that there's a difference between holding a book and reading a book on a tablet or on a computer.
Yeah.
I mean, you've experienced this yourself in your own life, I'm sure. And I used to think it was because I grew up reading books versus reading a tablet. But I've heard this now from many people who say, no, I much prefer the book.
I've actually heard that after the first kind of rush of people buying ebooks, that has settled way down. I actually spoke with a publisher about this who said, ebooks are kind of on the wane. More and more people actually want to hold a book in their hands. That made me really happy.
That makes me happy to hear too. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I think particularly for children, I think children having a child constantly reading on a computer is not a good idea.
Yeah, there have been so many good books written lately about attention span and all of that too, the distractibility that creeps in and how manipulated we are online. And that's all very intentional. So that's another topic for another day. But this practice of contemplating, that silence, that igniting of the spirit and the imagination, and that ability to connect ideas and images and words within themselves, what a beautiful thing to awaken in your children.
Yes, and you can't replicate that in any other way. You really can't. That type of getting right to their heart with pictures of God and Blessed Mother and all these events of, that happened in the life of Jesus and in their prayers. You can't replicate that. And this is the idea. There's a I can't remember anymore who said this. I believe it's a Jesuit, but a long time ago, said, if you give me the child till they're 7, the formation of that child, and they will have their faith for the rest of their life. And I think that was at a time when the formation of the child in the faith was throughout the culture. Throughout, they lived in a Catholic culture, and it was very a strong Catholic family, a strong Catholic culture, and they just formed this child in their faith. So wherever they went out in the world, they would have it. And we don't have that anymore. We don't have a Catholic culture. There aren't, you're a strong Catholic family and you're doing your best, but I wasn't formed in a Catholic culture. So it was a whole learning process for me as well. And you have to so this has to be such an intentional thing we do with our children from the very beginning, and also everything else they see. And that's the other thing. So I am going to say this, even if you are not going to homeschool, doing this with your small children in the beginning for the first, 5-7 years or something will not be wasted. This is not about homeschooling. This is the formation of a child's heart and mind in their faith. And so this applies to all families everywhere, that this is something you can do in your house. And having Catholic books and a Catholic culture and making your home kind of a little Catholic enclave will resonate in your family.
I love that. There's a scripture, I think it's Deuteronomy 28. I may be wrong, but it's, if you raise your children in the ways of God, when they are old, they will not depart from it. And I take comfort in that because, like many people, my young adult is not in the church at the moment, but I believe she'll circle back. And her almost 100-year-old grandmother always tells me, you've laid a strong foundation. It's there. It will never leave her. And I also want to say to anyone there cringing a little bit about trying to use sacred art because maybe you never had much exposure to it, that God completes what we leave unfinished. Would you say a little bit about maybe just one or two just simple steps to keep in mind when you're introducing sacred art so we don't panic and think we're not doing it right?
There's really like no way to to do this right. You look at your kids, so you can get, here you go. You can get this book and you can start teaching them their prayers and looking at sacred art. You can look in the back, who painted this. You can look at other art that artist did. And you can just slowly have your children appreciate what's good and beautiful, because everything they see in the world is teaching them that these hideous things are actually beautiful, that this upside down world we live in now, that everything is traditionally beautiful is now questionable, and everything that people, would normally say that's really not attractive is now considered, the culture is trying to push to change that, what is beautiful into what is ugly. And so I think at a young age, it should be, this is beautiful. Here it is. And they'll be naturally attracted to it because that's in the heart of all of us. So it's not a hard thing. Your kids are actually looking for this. This is in the heart of every human, to look for what's good and true and beautiful. This is what God has placed in our heart to find him. And so you introduce it to them, they will pick it right up, because that's what they want. That's what their heart is actually geared to see and understand. Our hearts aren't made to deal with lies. They're really not. And so when we see a lie, we try and somehow figure out, how is this true? We spend all this time trying to figure out this, because our in our minds and our hearts, we're looking for truth. So we're even searching for truth in lies. And so I think as a small child, you make it very clear to them, this is beautiful. This is true. This is the way we go. We go on the path to everything true and beautiful. And then you kind of teach them from a very young age. So when they're older, they're not all confused about, is that beautiful? Is that true? No, they'll have it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just beautiful. I do believe that it stays in their hearts, that it's something that God can breathe on those embers and bring back to a full flame at some point in their lives. Everybody, find Kerri and her family and their beautiful products at holyheroes.com, and you can reach out to Kerri at Kerri, that's Kerri, and it'll be in the show notes at holyheroes.com. Kerri, leave us with a final thought. You can tell us a little bit more about how we find your programs, anything that you'd like to share before we sign off for today.
Sure. We have, if you go to our website, holyheroes.com, at the bottom, you can sign up for all of our free programs, which are Advent Adventure and Lenten Adventure, Summer Faith Adventure. There's a Marian Consecration that's also free. There's a couple of others. There's a pro-life. You can follow the development of a child. You can have spiritual adoption program. So there's a lot of Holy Heroes programs that are free to your family to help your children to kind of inculcate this in their lives and in your family life, and make this part of, build your Catholic world in your home. And to make it easier for you to do that. So those are our free programs. And of course, you can find these books. You can find the I Believe book and Praying with Angel books on our website as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Just so exciting. Thank you for all that you do for others, Kerri, and for this inspiring conversation. You've even made me feel better about it. And I always thought, yeah, great, let's have sacred art around. But just having kind of the concepts, the ideas, and a veteran who's really invested deeply into this topic, it's very reassuring. So thank you so much today for being with us and helping us out.
Thank you for having me here.
Oh, it's a delight. We got to do it again, Kerri. Everybody, thank you so much for being with us. Have a happy and holy day with your children. God bless you for all that you do in your families and communities. And that's our show for today. Our program is sponsored by homeschoolconnections.com. Be sure to subscribe to Homeschooling Saints and leave us an honest review. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.